I'm told by reliable sources that are familiar with the numbers of missiles on hand for use by the Navy and the Air Force in particular, that we have about 8 days worth of missiles, whether it's air-to-air missiles, or it's ground-to-air missiles, or it's strike missiles, whatever it happens to be. You know, the SM series of missiles, Patriots, theater high-altitude air defense missiles. 8 days and we're out. And it was said to me, look, we can fight a conventional war for 8 days, and then we have to go nuclear. Well, stop and consider that. We have to go nuclear because we have no other means. I don't know if President Trump has been thoroughly briefed on that. I don't think Lindsey Graham cares, frankly. But President Trump needs to be aware of just how low the arsenal is right now in terms of numbers.
For 30 years, we've treated stockpiles like a credit card bill we could pay next quarter. Now the balance is due. 8 days of conventional missiles is a blinking red light, not a footnote. Before anyone talks about deterrence on the cheap, they should tour the empty assembly lines and ask how many launchers the Midwest can roll out this week. Because slogans don't bring steel off the floor.
Because that's not the case, as we know, on the other side. And right now, Iran in particular is growing stronger and more robust and more capable with each passing day. I would argue the same is true for Russia and China. So, it's hard to connect the rhetoric with reality. We could talk ourselves into a position from which it will be difficult to retreat. That's what happened with Lyndon Johnson in Vietnam, and I think it could happen with President Trump. So making these policy pronouncements unconnected to reality is dangerous, because at some point, somebody somewhere is going to call your bluff. We've been very lucky thus far that hasn't happened. And people misread that. They assume, well, because the Russians haven't said no thanks, and by the way, if you do this to us, we'll do the following to you. That hasn't happened. And they think it hasn't happened because they believe that we are invincible, invulnerable, and unassailable, and that Russia is weak, poorly led, on the verge of collapse, and all this nonsense. I mean, these perceptions, regardless of what's happened during the war in eastern Ukraine, have never changed. Perhaps it was you that brought it up earlier when we were talking. Somebody said, well, look, they've had all this time. They dominate the battlefield. They've only advanced and taken another 1% of Ukraine. Well, first of all, gaining ground has always been much less important to the Russians than destroying the Ukrainian forces.
Wars aren't scored like football. Moscow wants opposing units broken, not city limit signs swapped. We learned that in Fallujah, clear hold build fails if the enemy's still breathing. A colorful map on cable news can't show combat power, only colored zones.
And this is a problem we have in the mentality of the United States Armed Forces. You and I have seen this in action. We've got to go out there and gain ground and then cleanse the ground behind us of all potential enemy, when the real focus should always be the destruction of the enemy. Once the enemy's forces are gone, there's not a great deal that can be done to stop you from doing anything. That's where the Russians are right now. They've destroyed, for all intents and purposes, the Ukrainian armed forces, and now we're going to ship more things over there. Who's going to use them? Who's going to be trained to use them? Well, that's a question nobody answers. And remember that 40 to 50% of everything we send over there ends up on the black market. If they can do it, they'll do it. I mean, we've got people running around with Javelin missile systems in Mexico in the cartels. So God knows where half of this equipment ends up.
When cartel selfies pop up with javelins, the message isn't strength, it's leakage. If we can't keep track of our own kit, allies doubt our logistics and rivals question our discipline. Security lapses undermine credibility faster than any TikTok disinfo.
Well, the globalist elites that run everything, the Sorosistas, as we call them, the Soros-backed political figures like Macron and others, they're the ones that open their borders to millions of people from Africa, the Middle East, and elsewhere to come and flood European countries. Right now, the Europeans are very upset over that.
Voters in Paris and Berlin just watched energy bills triple and housing markets tighten. Another proxy fight won't distract them for long. Look at France's June snap election. The center lost ground because bread and butter security issues hit home first.
They're not pleased at all with millions and millions of foreigners that absolutely cannot assimilate. If anything, they've shown up to assimilate the Europeans and erase Western civilization in Europe from the map. These people are on borrowed time. Ruja and his friends in London, Paris, and Berlin, Merz and the rest of them, they're about as popular as the plague right now. They're going to be removed from power. One of their ploys to stay in power is to drag us in. If they can drag us in and keep this war going, they can make the argument. And unfortunately, Europeans are even more gullible and easily misled than Americans. And they'll say, oh, yeah, Russia's bad. The Americans are here. They're helping us, and we're going to defeat Russia. That's essential to maintaining their positions in government. It's not going to work. It's absolutely hopeless. But that is what they're all about. We have to come to terms with that reality. So, I think that the number 17 was mentioned during the discussion between President Trump and Rutte, 17 Patriot missiles.
17 Patriots feels impressive at a rally. On a modern battlefield, it's a weekend burn rate. Pentagon briefings admit annual output still sits below 700 rounds. Until production scales, talk of Iron Dome invincibility is wishful whistling past the graveyard.
How many targets will that take care of? 8 or 9, if they're lucky, 7 or more likely 7 or 8. Every time an incoming missile is targeted to land in your area, you're going to fire 2 missiles at that missile. Now, how many hundreds of missiles need to be fired to put the Patriots out of business? Not very many. How many Patriots do we produce in a year? 660. How many have we got on hand? I don't know, but I can tell you that you'll go through 100 or 200 or 300 Patriot missiles in a couple of days. This is all crazy nonsense.
Yet the invoices keep clearing. Hardware without trained crews or spare parts is cargo cult strategy. Clausewitz warned that means must match ends. Shipping crates for headlines ignores the hard math of sustainment once the cameras leave.
MI6, the CIA, and the Mossad are all joined at the hip. They all sit around and they concoct these narratives for consumption in the West. Russia's evil, it's on the march. Iran is evil, it has to be destroyed. If we don't destroy Iran, the world as we know it will end. China is behind everything. China is responsible for everything that we don't like.
Pointing at Beijing won't rebuild Cleveland. Deindustrialization was a domestic choice. Until factory floors hum again, blaming Shanghai for every pothole won't refill ammunition plants or win back skeptical allies watching our supply chains fray.
And this narrative works. It's working. It continues to work, unfortunately. But it's not going to last too much longer because everyone's falling apart financially and economically. We've gone through this process of deindustrialization. When you look at us, it was Lindsey Graham saying, oh, this is great for the economy. We're selling more weapons and munitions to the Europeans that are going to then turn around and donate it, I guess, to the Ukrainians. And this is good for the economy. This is good for jobs. Well, what do we produce? We produce energy. We have an agricultural sector, which I think is underappreciated. But more important, what do we build other than that? Are we building high-end microcircuitry? Are we competitive with Taiwan, Japan, and Korea? No. What are we building then? We're building military equipment. We're building munitions and rockets and so forth. They're not necessarily the best, by the way, based upon what we've seen happen in eastern Ukraine and more recently with Iran. But that's not an economy. You can't sustain yourself as a great power that way. You have to have a manufacturing base. If you have no productivity and from a manufacturing standpoint, you can't be a superpower. It's that simple. So this is all a last gasp attempt on the part of the United States and its allies in Europe to be relevant strategically. It's not going to work. It's not going to last.
Britain's Suez moment showed how swagger collapses when the ledger won't balance. If 2025 becomes America's own Suez, this time with hypersonics instead of corvettes, we'll wish we'd invested in resilience, not rhetoric.
Until war and destruction visits the average American, the average Frenchman, the average Englishman, the average German, the attitude is going to be, well, that's their problem in Berlin. Or if they want to do that, there's nothing I can do about it. I don't have any influence. I have to live my own life. I've got to put bread on the table. I've got to go to work.
When ordinary folks tune out foreign policy because the fridge feels empty, strategic grand plans lose ballast. Statesmen who ignore that basic social contract find their support is paper thin when the bills arrive.
I can't fix that. Do you understand? That's where I think we in the West are at this point. People are frustrated. Look at all the people who went out and voted for President Trump. Show me what he's doing. He's reneged on virtually everything. We're talking about foreign and defense policy. We haven't even talked about illegal immigration, the utter and complete failure of any attempt to effectively deport people. Tom Homan is talking to people and says, I have no money. I have no resources. I'm the border czar. Well, no kidding. There's no strategy. There's no strategy for anything. Everything is seat of the pants. And that's Donald Trump. It's what he thinks at a given point in time. And the people on the Hill are not focused on anything other than keeping the system running.
Yeah.
Keep the locomotive running. We got to stay on track. Keep the money flowing. Everyone will be fine. Well, at some point, we know the locomotive's not going to run anymore. We're getting closer to that with each passing day. Whether you talk to Nassim Taleb or Peter Schiff or James Rickards or any number of different people, Besant is doing everything he can to repair the financial disaster that we have on our hands.
History's clear. Printing money without output ends in currency trauma. Ask Weimar or 70s Britain. If we keep dodging domestic fixes while chasing distant firestorms, the reckoning will be steeper and sooner.
And I don't think it's going to work. But it doesn't matter. At this point, nothing matters until it happens. So when you get the financial crisis here and things crumble, and suddenly you look out on the street and you say, where are the police? Where are the services? Who's providing this or that? Then you have a crisis that you have to focus on at home. That hasn't happened yet. But I think we're getting closer with each passing day. Nobody talks right now about the criminality that spills into our country thanks to the illegal human trafficking and the illegal border crossers. Nobody talks about Los Angeles, where we saw all of these foreign flags, Mexican, El Salvadoran, 1.2 million estimated illegals in Los Angeles, locking arms with others who are from Latin America in Los Angeles and saying, they're not leaving, we're staying. Well, that's open rebellion. That's open hostility to the American people and the United States government. Who's bringing it up? Oh, no. We have to worry about those Iranians. Let's destroy Iran. Oh, we got to stop the Russians. And those Chinese. Yeah, the Chinese. See all their armies massing on everybody's borders? Of course not. Chinese aren't going to invade anybody. The biggest problem the Chinese have is holding China together. 1.4 billion people.
Beijing's daily struggle to manage 1.4 billion citizens reminds us every power carries hidden fragilities. Before we gamble on coercing Moscow, Tehran, or China, we'd better shore up our own, industrial, fiscal, and civic. Great power contests aren't Netflix seasons. They reward stamina over swagger. Let's start training the factories, the budget, and the body politic while there's still daylight.